It's becoming increasingly evident that the political establishment, particularly within the Labour Party, is teetering on the brink of collapse. The leadership crisis under Keir Starmer is not just an issue of policy failures or misguided diplomacy. It is an indictment of his inability to maintain any semblance of integrity, unity, or accountability within his own party. When your own MPs walk away in droves, and when the fundamental principles of your party are abandoned for political expediency, it is time to face the uncomfortable truth. Starmer's leadership is a liability to both the Labour Party and the country at large. The Labour Party has long prided itself on being the voice of the working class, the marginalised, and the disenfranchised. But under Starmer, it is becoming unrecognisable. His recent string of controversial policies, from welfare cuts that will devastate the disabled community to his subservience in the face of international humiliation, reveals a leader who is not just out of touch, but one who has fundamentally failed to protect the interests of those he claims to represent. Let's begin with the most glaring issue facing Starmer's leadership, the growing rebellion within his own ranks. The resignation of Mike Asbury, the Labour MP for Runcorn, should have been a wake-up call. Asbury, convicted of assault after punching one of his own constituents, only resigned after relentless public pressure, not because of any moral compass or leadership directive from Starmer, but because Reform UK made sure the scandal didn't disappear into the ether. The audacity of an MP to continue collecting a salary while serving time in prison is staggering enough, but what is even more telling is Starmer's silence on the issue. How can a leader who remains mum on such obvious misconduct demand trust from the public? Starmer failed to act when it mattered most, undermining his own credibility and showing a complete lack of leadership. But the internal strife within the Labour Party is far from over. Starmer is now facing widespread dissent over his plans to slash welfare spending, a move that could push hundreds of thousands of disabled Brits into poverty. As many as 80 Labour MPs are reportedly gearing up for a rebellion against these cuts, which amount to a devastating £70 billion reduction in welfare by 2030. Starmer's justification for this policy echoes the same tired arguments made by the Conservative Party for years, claims that the welfare system is unsustainable and unfair. It is deeply disheartening to see Starmer parroting conservative austerity measures, policies that have already inflicted immeasurable harm on the most vulnerable in society. When you have prominent charities and MPs like Rachel Marscall sounding the alarm over these cuts, it is clear that Starmer is leading Labour down a dangerous path. The notion that the welfare state needs dismantling to balance the books is not only wrong, it is morally indefensible. But perhaps the most damning indictment of Starmer's leadership is his foreign policy. His handling of international relations has been nothing short of embarrassing. Take his meeting with Donald Trump. For instance, Trump mocked Starmer's accent, and Starmer, rather than standing his ground, grinned like a fool. Why still, when Trump made it clear that he would not reverse tariffs on British goods, Starmer had nothing to say in response. It was a humiliating spectacle. This wasn't just a failure of diplomacy, it was a failure of basic political acumen. Starmer's apparent inability to assert Britain's interests on the world stage makes it abundantly clear that he is not fit to lead. And it doesn't stop there. Starmer's handling of the Falkland Islands, now known as the Chagos Islands, further highlights his lack of competence on the global stage. Reports that his government is prepared to cede control of these islands to Mauritius, despite warnings from security experts and military officials, only serve to reinforce the idea that Starmer is more interested in appeasing international pressures than standing up for Britain's sovereignty. At a time when the UK needs strong, decisive leadership, Starmer has failed to demonstrate either. The message could not be clearer. Starmer's Labour Party is in disarray. His lack of action on internal scandals, his abandonment of core Labour values in favour of austerity, and his embarrassing performance on the world stage all point to a leader who is woefully unfit to lead. The question now is whether Labour MPs will continue to follow him off a cliff or whether they will finally take a stand to protect their party's future and the future of the nation. Keir Starmer has proven time and again that he is more concerned with political survival than with the welfare of the British people. His policies are alienating his own party and his leadership is falling apart. The Labour Party needs a leader who will stand firm on its values, who will protect the most vulnerable in society, and who will represent Britain with strength and dignity on the international stage. It's time for Starmer to step aside and allow someone with the courage, conviction, and competence to take the reins before it's too late.